Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Catherine Bennett.
And I'm Mark Lambert.
And joining us today is Father Robert McTeigue. We'll say hello, Father, before we run through who you are. So you're very welcome.
Very glad to be here. I've been following your work for a good long time. It's a treat to catch up with you.
Oh, thank you. And we're following yours. So let's tell people a little about that. Mark, maybe you'll just pull up the website as I share the information. So Father is a member of the US Eastern Province of the Society of Jesus, the host of The Catholic Current, a radio talk show that airs on the stations of the Cross Catholic Media Network, and is a member of the National Ethics Committee of the Catholic Medical Association. And your latest books, Father, from Ignatius Press, Real Philosophy for Real People, Tools for Truthful Living, and Christendom Lost and Found, Meditations for a Post-Christian Era. And Father McTeigue's work can be found at that website, which Mark just brought up, heraldofthegospel.org. So many places people can find you, and your work is excellent. So we're really delighted to welcome you to talk with you today. But I think, Mark, you wanted to jump in first and ask Father about his role as a Jesuit priest.
Well, it turns out we've got quite a lot in common, Father, haven't we? I went to a Jesuit school. I'm not actually a Jesuit. You are.
Right.
God's Marines. And obviously, having gone to a Jesuit school, I have a great sort of background with the Jesuits and a special devotion to St. Edmund Campion. That was the school I went to, was the Campion School. But also, you're from Mayo. You're from the west coast of Ireland, which is where my family are from, or your family are from there.
Right. My father's grandmother was from Ballyhonus, and every day she would have her children and later her grandchildren recite her address, number 10 Knox Street, the flat over the shop, Ballyhonus, County Mayo. God bless me, Ireland. And 120. And she left right before Our Lady appeared at Knock. She left as a little girl. 125 years later, I went back. I too went to a Jesuit school. I went to Heathrow College in London to study theology from 1994 to 1996. It was in the Kensington area of London, and I was able to make it over there to Ireland. It was a great grace for me.
Excellent stuff. Why did you choose the Jesuit order? Like, was it because of an experience you had as a young man? What was it that made you choose the Society of Jesus?
I was in doctoral studies at the Catholic University of America as a layman in philosophy, working in the business world. And I met a newly ordained Jesuit priest named Father Robert Spitzer. And we were in doctoral studies together. We had the same mentor, wrote our dissertations under him. And I kept telling Father Spitzer, the business world doesn't have any appeal for me. Academia is not enough. There's got to be something else, a something more. And he introduced me to the late Jesuit Father Thomas King. I met with Father King, and he said, you've thought about the important questions, and you've probably thought about them better than most people have, but it's not clear to me that you've prayed over the questions. So I made an 8-day retreat with him based on the spiritual exercise of St. Ignatius Loyola. And St. Ignatius just swept me off my feet. His vision of distinguishing oneself in the service of Christ the King, I looked at that and I said, how could you understand this and not want it? So it was because of St. Ignatius to excel in the service of Christ the King, to give your all, and above all, to help souls. That just won my heart. I celebrated 35 years in the Society of Jesus this August on the Solemnity of the Assumption. I haven't lived my vocation perfectly. I am a sinner, but I've never regretted joining.
And you've worked as a parish priest. You worked in parishes over the years. And what led you to the position you're in now, where you're doing this ministry, reaching out to people on YouTube and on radio?
Well, on the air, I like to refer to myself as a recovering academic. I spent most of my Jesuit life teaching at universities and seminaries at the graduate, undergraduate level, philosophy and theology. And I loved teaching until I didn't, and I made a discernment. I think it's time to do something else. I think when I started to interrupt my lectures with the observation, this is the part where you write down what I say, and students would look at me in bewilderment and later look at me in indignation. I said, I think I need to do something different. I found myself in Buffalo, New York, teaching at a seminary, and got involved with the local Carmelite monastery. And while I was there, I met Jim Wright, who's the president of the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Became friends. He asked me to once a week host a call-in show. He said, "You seem to be a natural for this sort of thing. Why don't you have a go at it?" And it's been 7 years this August. And I found that my experience in doing research and teaching, even with spiritual direction, being a good listener, teaching rhetoric and homiletics, all that folded in very nicely. And I have an opportunity to restore the lost art of intelligent conversation. And Jim Wright has given me a blank check. He said, "It's your program, your show, no forbidden topics, no forbidden guests." And he's lived that for 7 years. It's exhausting work. It's demanding work, as you know, and sometimes I have a lot of fun with it. But the feedback is we're helping souls, and we're offering something like Catholic Current that isn't offered in very many other places on the air in the United States.
Yeah, we're
That's
big
wonderful.
fans of
Thank you.
the Station of the Cross. We've got obviously a connection with Joe McLean.
Right.
Like we sort of go on his show and he comes on our show. We met him in Tennessee earlier this year, both Catherine and I, didn't we, Catherine? And
Right.
Yeah.
get on like house
Yeah,
on
he's
fire. I really like Joe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Joe's very good. Father, you and I share a background in teaching, and I was very interested to read a piece you've just written for the New Oxford Review. And when I was in teaching, and I'm sure you too, well, you say as much, people often say, even members of staff say, you've got to prepare kids for the real world. And there's this idea that the real world is out there and we've got to be in the real world and you can't just avoid it. And I think the point you argue in this article, which is absolutely fabulously written, by the way,
Thank you.
and it's such an interesting point. What the world out the window is not the real world. It's the realm of common experience. And so we should think of it not as the world out there, outside our front doors, as real, but you draw attention to reality, objective reality. And so when we talk about preparing our young people for the real world, it's about saying, what does reality mean? Because we live in a time which is very, very distant from reality in the realm of common experience. So do you want to just say something about that? There's so many things we'd love to talk with you about, but that article was just brilliant.
I'm hoping this won't be our last conversation.
Yeah.
The realm of common experience is where we have to navigate. We have to drive, we have to go shopping, we have to take turns, we have to say please and thank you. And I would tell my students, and the realm of common experience is also where people want to hurt your loved ones and eat your soul. So I said, if I were a Harry Potter character, I would be the professor against the dark arts. If I were an anime or manga character, I would teach you how to be an anti-relativist ninja. And then to help clear away the fog. I mean, it comes back to Plato's cave in the Republic, doesn't it? There's the realm of shadow and illusions and whispers and echoes. And someone has to say, that stuff isn't really real. It can hurt you, but it's not the truth. Step away and discover what's really real, the true, the good, and the beautiful, that the world, the flesh, and the devil want to shroud over. You know, in Greek, the word for truth, aletheia, means an unveiling. It also means an unforgetting. And so I want to help people discover the truth through the tools of reason and grace. And sadly, we live in a world that wants to work against that. Because if you're involved in the true, the good, and the beautiful, you're not becoming addicted to things and you're not buying things.
Excellent.
That's beautiful. The other avenue of meeting, very much I felt like watching this recent series you've been doing on manhood. That is so powerful and it's so pertinent. It's so well observed, and each one of the episodes that you've done has struck me so powerfully. Like, you know, the fact of the way that we treat men in the culture, and our priest, the one you did about the priesthood, which I sent to several friends. I mean, you hit every note on that, and I just thought like that intersection with Catherine's femininity, like Catherine often talks about, like the importance of authentic femininity and the danger of feminism, which is another thing that you refer to. I love that idea of, you know, Father Typical at St. whatever it was, you know, like
Father
trying to be
Cheerful,
rather happy.
yes.
Yeah, trying
Yeah.
to be all things to all men, and sort of worshipping the bearded lady who's only ever nice to everyone, not
Right.
Jesus on the cross, who understands what it means to shoulder, you know, to deal with enemies, to take the stripes of the whip, and
Right.
such powerful message, Father.
And it spoke to you, Father, just briefly, it spoke to you, Mark, as a man, and it spoke to me as a woman, because you open with a question in one of your talks: where are people complain, where are all the good men at? And that's what I hear from a lot of my female friends. And you give a fantastic answer into that.
Well, I said, yeah, you killed them. I said, first you aborted them, then you prevented their birth through contraception, and then you've been emasculating them stage by stage, primarily through public school and media. And the ones that you haven't completely killed or emasculated, you sent off to wars that didn't have to be fought. And then when men come home and they're shattered by war and they're lost and disoriented, and they are absolutely ripe to discover the Logos, the Word made flesh, the God-man, we bring them to church where the music ministry is singing variations of Jesus is my girlfriend. That's monstrous. It's horrifying. I've seen the terrible cost myself. I've banged my head against a lot of brick walls trying to sound the alarm. And then I started to make this series of videos, and the response has been astonishing. The comments on YouTube, the emails the website gets, some of them moved me to tears. There are men who have been isolated in their anguish for years and decades. And the perennial wisdom of the church can heal them on the condition that we let it out. And for a lot of different reasons, both the authentic feminine and the authentic masculine are not welcome among large cadres of the human elements of the church.
Why is it? How have we ended up here? It feels like a dream, you know, that's led us to a position where we don't even understand what a man or a woman is. We're unable to, like, how broken is our society? And it worries me so much as a father of sons and daughters that we have, you know, the one place you would expect to have an answer to those questions is the church. You know, it's as someone who studied theology, like the anthropological dimension to that, it's just so far at odds with this LGBT culture. They're diametrically opposed to each other, Father, aren't they?
Well, you know, I very much unexpectedly found myself in medical ethics. My area of specialty in my training was metaphysics and natural theology, but I spent a year as a chaplain in a trauma center in a major urban hospital. And when I got to university, they said, right, you're doing medical ethics now. And one of the things that I discovered looking at the culture, looking at the science, et cetera, was that apparently the ultimate desideratum, the ultimate greatest good that culture is striving for is to have sex without consequence. We want to trivialize, denature, and make irrelevant sex so that we can have as much sexual pleasure as possible. And sometimes we do it in obvious and gross and vulgar ways. And sometimes we do it cloaked in academia, while wearing academic regalia and using academic postmodern terms. But a lot of what's driving the destruction between of authentic male and female is the rejection of the sixth commandment. And ultimately, this is just another phase in the spiritual war. One of the consequences of making the spiritual exercise of St. Ignatius is you can't help but see that souls are being contested for. And right now, this is the principal weapon of the enemy.
And that's why I go back to your, sorry, Mark.
Well, I was just going to say, I found myself on a child sexual exploitation course at the Civic Centre this week. And
don't exploit them. There you go.
Yeah, it was, that was basically my response to the whole course. But as we were going through it, the really lovely lady who was giving the lecture, you know, I was just giving Catholic answers. It's like we've abandoned morality, you know. And I didn't say, well, the Catholic Church teaches, but I was just the discussions that we got into all the answers were so obvious to me. And the fact of the matter is, we've abandoned any sense of morality now. We equate morality, moral rectitude, with law. So if something like abortion is lawful, that means it's a moral good, as far as the vast majority of people understand. And that is a massive failure of the church.
You know, slavery used to be lawful too.
Say
Right?
that again, Bob.
Slavery used to be lawful, and sodomy used to be illegal. So the idea of conflating law and morality doesn't even serve well the interests of the people who want to advocate for that. I was in a moral theology seminar as a graduate student, and I got into a very heated argument with another student. And the professor said, well, you know, these are really difficult questions, and who's to say what's right and what's wrong? And I pounded the table and I said, I'm to say, because I'm a being of reason and a recipient of grace. And someday I'm going to have to walk into a classroom, a pulpit, or a confessional, and I have to offer the people of God something better than a shrug of the shoulders. I want to at least make an effort that's worthy of a refutation. So I'm not ready to give up on truth just yet. And he said, oh, is it time for tea already? And he